Welcome back to the Optimized Equine Podcast. Equine Osteopath Vanessa Helvey is back with me today, and we're going to be joined again by Branham of Devereux Sporthorses. Vanessa wasn't able to join me for my last chat with Dev, so I'm excited to have the three of us together today. So we can dive a bit deeper. I think there was many pieces of conversations that we could have talked more on, Dev. So I'm excited to be able to do that today and have Vanessa here to join us. One of the things I wanted to start with was talking a bit about the horse show world and how we can make the experience for horses better. I think right now, competitions, no matter really what discipline, are really focused on and about the people and the horses
exactly
along for the ride, and there's so many different directions of things that could be done to make it better. So I wanted to talk about that a bit today with you all. So thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. For anybody who didn't get to watch your last episode yet, you are pretty involved in that hunter jumper world. You were a traditional hunter jumper trainer, and then we had our evolution, let's say, and
that's right,
change things around. So maybe fill us in briefly on that, just for anybody who didn't catch the last one, and then you can dive in from there.
Yeah, sure. So it was about 2013. Like, my career trajectory had kind of plateaued a little bit, and I felt like the next steps of gaining or attaining goals or achieving success or whatever I thought that meant at the time felt like I was going to have to take a step with the horses in a direction that didn't feel good. And it occurred to me at that time how important it was for the horses, the people, everyone involved to feel better. And I didn't have in my traditional training access to that, the things that would help get that goal set. Like, the things that I do think the traditional ways can, if they're not working, they can go real poorly and create like a bad situation for people and for horses. And so just started a journey where came across a horseman named Mark Rashid and started learning under him, and just found a principle-based way of working with horses that has been amazing and has led to a lot of personal growth and a lot more consideration of the horse and their experience of what we're trying to do, and allowed me to do the pursuits with horses that I found fun and like fulfilling in a way that considered them and allowed them to be a part of it, not just something that it was happening to. And so kind of getting to that point of like, it's a long journey, and there's still a long journey to go. At a point where my understanding of the work I do and my embodiment, the ability to share it with other people, is allowing me to get more and more into like the hunter jumper showing world, clinicking. I'm getting to share more of that now. And so, it's really kind of exciting, but still looking for ways to be softer, be more thoughtful, to interact with the horses in a way that they can have clarity and understanding of what they're doing, rather than just kind of pushing and forcing and making.
Yeah. So let's say Dev's running the show. They handed you the keys of we'll just say the state of Texas. We'll start with that. With Texas hunter jumper. You are now in charge of it. Okay. So what is our first rule change? Let's start there.
That's really an interesting question.
And maybe it doesn't have to be a rule change. Maybe it doesn't have to be taking something away. It's an implementing.
Yeah. So
it could be anything.
I think and none of this is like in order of importance. It's kind of the things that just popped into my head first, right? So I think like from a standpoint of judging, so for like hunters and equitation specifically, I do feel like there's still an element of aesthetic that drives some of what people do in the sport that maybe we could no longer tend to. So like things like clipping off the whiskers on the face, for example, like the vibracy. That is something that there are judges out there that are, well, that horse didn't get properly cleaned up for this show. And they can't unsee it. It's just kind of ingrained into their head that horse should be clean shaven, presented, and the horse could be putting in a style around. And I do think something like that could color the judge's impression. And I think like implementing a policy where like that, like an aesthetic choice that has a negative effect on the well-being of the horse shouldn't count against someone. I know in Europe it's been outlawed. Like you can't trim the whiskers of a horse. I think a similar policy should be here, but in the least case, like people making the choice of the best for their horse shouldn't be looked down upon in judging.
And but I mean, I'm sure, like you said, until it becomes something where you are not allowed to do it.
Yeah.
How many of the judges out there are really going to be okay with seeing it?
Exactly. And that's why I think that's a policy change that ultimately needs to happen. That where, okay, everyone is coming in with their horse's sense organs intact. No one is entering the ring without that. Like, and so then it neutralizes it. It doesn't, the personal opinion no longer matters because it's now everyone is entering the ring with the same.
Now the old school judge is going to be peeved at everyone equally.
Exactly. But it at least then evens out the, But and then I think that can.
It's the same thing about all of the aesthetic things, whether it's tack or
exactly.
It's like even if the rules don't say you do or don't have to, it's still there's going to be a lot of that mindset that judges it a certain way, and if you're in hunters, you're being judged. So.
Yeah, exactly. I think with the tack things, like martingales, for example, even horses that have zero need for them are wearing them because that's the tradition. But for me, it's like I look at it as like, hey, look at that horse not needing a martingale. Look at the work that person did with the horse to help the horse understand the way of going so that the horse doesn't need this tack artificially placing it there. Or something like Pelham's in the Eckring. Like, why are we riding this horse with a leverage bit? Why are we not rewarding the rider or the program that's put this horse into an understanding of its job enough that like it doesn't need the extra leverage of that kind of bit or tack to.
And so fill us in, for those that aren't familiar with the equitation ring, fill us in on what you mean by that statement, because I know.
Sure. So it is traditionally more proper for an equitation rider to ride in a Pelham, which is a leverage bit that has a curb chain and a shank. And so there would be one rein on the essentially connected to the snaffle, and then an additional rein connected to the shank that controls the curb. And some of the thoughts I've heard around this are, well, like an equitation rider should be able to ride with two reins. They need to demonstrate that they have like the command in their hands to control the reins. And I think there's even like, and I think this shows up in Western too with like spade bits and stuff, that like the ability of this horse to respond to aids is sharpened when it has this kind of bit. I think is also a thought that goes like the horse is more likely to get into the counter canter, or the horse is going to have a more solid halt if they're going to be more adjustable to the jump and doing like controlling path and pace, like if they have this tack. But I think my thought is like, well, we could be doing the training where those aids could become more subtle. We can do the work on ourselves on how we're presenting this to the horse, and then do the work with the horse so that they actually understand what we're asking and then are willingly offering it, not doing it under the pressure of additional tack or aids.
I think the dangerous part is, what I would say is probably one of my bigger complaints about the hunter jumper discipline, if you just kind of go casually watch it, is I do think there is room for refinement and that kind of thing. I don't think that's complete BS, that statement of that kind of a thing with stronger bits and that, all of that. But the problem is there's no appreciation of what you're saying, of like, we could be doing it with less and less and less and less. That should be rewarded.
Mm-hmm.
And it's by not appreciating that and leaving it this way, it opens the door for the people who are using the stuff so poorly.
Mm-hmm.
And hurts the horse.
Yeah, I think it's, like you mentioned spade bits. I think there are certain people that are using spade bits in an artful way, and it really can be beautiful, but it's rare. I see a lot of scary stuff.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean? And so that's the downside to just having it be out there and all of that, and not really forcing anyone to do it in a more refined and more subtle way, you know?
Well, I wonder if it comes to this idea, like, of, have we actually earned it? Like, I, as the rider with this specific horse, have I earned this level of control? Or are we just arbitrarily providing it to people because that's the look? So I think, like, whether there's kindness in something, like whether it's a bit or the use of an aid, really comes down to our ability to control ourselves while using it or applying it. And then we maybe can earn that kind of connection or that type of mechanic with the horse. But like you said, you just don't see a lot of people using that seem like they have earned that with their horse.
And especially not in the competitive world, if you think about it. Almost all of these artful riders that I can think of are not people that I've necessarily come across because of competition.
Yes. Yeah.
Unfortunately. Now, Vanessa, I know you have a little bit of experience personally in the cutting world, but you've also been around plenty of other disciplines, horses that are competing in things. What are your thoughts on the aesthetics? Is that something that was brought up much when in cutting? Is that a thing?
In cutting, it's not about how pretty you look, or the part of the uniform is chaps and spurs and a curb bit, but at least in the 2 minutes and 30 seconds you have in the pen, you are not in their face at all. You will get deducted for that. And so I did appreciate that about cutting. Some of the other Western sports are about the bling or how you look, but it is very much like, no, this is raw. We're going in there. We're working cows. Now, all that being said, to get to that point where you're, cutting your cow and you're not in their mouth, and then you drop your rein once the horse hooks on, and you're never in their mouth. But to get there is a different story. And that was what wasn't so pretty. But you see that all across, right? But, you see people on the flag or in the practice pen before they go in, and they're yanking on these curb bits and spurring at the same time. And not everybody was doing that, but just to say that you see those things in every discipline, but at least that's what I did appreciate about that sport, is that it was based on this heritage of ranching where you had to separate a cow from the herd to doctor it or whatever. And so they're not about the aesthetics, I would say. But just to kind of piggyback on the conversation you guys are having, I think until, like, in these disciplines, if the judges could look past aesthetics, we're putting aesthetics over function, right? And exactly what you're saying. And at the end of the day, some of those riders, like you said, haven't earned the right to use that tack because they're not skilled at it. And so it's hurting the horse, but because it's more about the aesthetics over the function, then these behaviors get rewarded. And, that's sad.
It's funny in a way. Well, unfunny, I suppose. Like you're saying, it's being rewarded over function, and like that's what equitation should be all about, is like
Is
showing
function.
functionality.
Yeah.
But
Literally the definition. Yeah.
Definitely depends on, I guess, what we're talking about. What is functioning?
Yeah.
Is it the horse? Because it's not usually the horse at that point, I'm afraid. Not well, anyway, you know.
And I think
in
Go ahead,
cutting, they
Vanessa.
don't need a shaved face, you
No.
know. It's, I mean, they're blanketed so that they don't have this long hair. But I have to say, I really appreciated being put into that position. Another Masterson practitioner named Lisa Haldane, and she's a teacher and an educator too. She gave me the opportunity to come to Arizona and be a loper for her. And she was doing everything, I'm going to say, in a way that really put the horse first. And so she gave me a great foundation. And I just really I love cutting, and I love cutting horses, of course, but I have an appreciation for those horses and for the trainers out there that are trying to do it right. Cause it's not about at all the aesthetics of how they look or whatever. It's about getting the job done.
And I think like one of the things you mentioned earlier, like as far as function, and then especially like in the show ring, what we see can sometimes look really good, but we're not seeing what happened before that to get it there.
And that was rampant. Sorry.
Yeah.
That was rampant in the cutting world. I mean, to get those horses to that level, it takes someone who's going to not want to do shortcuts and have patience, because they're showing those horses at 2. So they got to get them there. So how do you think they get them there? It's not kind.
Yeah. And that's, think like what my hope as far as my contribution to this world is like developing what that process is to have that same look as the end, like in the show ring, and have the methods that we got there be kinder and more considerate of the horse.
Yeah.
And like where we're emphasizing where are we finding function and the least interference, like, or at the least detriment to the horse here, which I'd be interested to hear more, like, with your thoughts on the body work around that. Cause I actually think there's quite a connection here, with like the preparation, like where the body work element of having that end product. I'd just like to hear, because I think there's some interesting things there. Are there things that are not great to see in the body work prior to a show? And are there things that are better to see?
So that's a cool question. And like when you were talking about Mark Rashid, I kept thinking of Jim Masterson, because Jim Masterson and Mark Rashid work together a lot. And I'm also a Masterson practitioner and instructor. And Jim would talk about, well, this is how he got his start, was working on horses in the hunter jumper world. And then he started sharing his method and teaching it. But he would actually work on the horses before they would go show, 45 minutes to kind of like an athlete or a dancer, like you get moving, like, you stretch a little bit. You don't go overboard because you want to hold to tension to a degree to be able to go out and do your job and to be able to perform in a way that you have been performing. Because if you go in and do a really deep body work session or make a bunch of changes to the horse right before they go show, it's gonna throw them off. And like, depending on the discipline, like, cutting horses, for instance, and I'm just saying this because I have the most experience with them, they need a little bit more tension than other types of horses, because they've got to really be able to hold those stops. So if you go in and do like a deep gluteal massage, you're not going to hold your stops as well. So Jim made it work where he could go in and, like I said, do kind of a light, go all over 45 minutes, do some range of motion, just kind of relax them a little bit, and they'd go off and do great. But that's Jim Masterson. So me personally, when I'm teaching or if I'm put in that situation, I don't really want to work on a horse at a show or right before they go show. You can, but it needs to be with that thought in mind that you don't want to take away so much tension or compensation that then the horse is going to be kind of destabilized or having to find a new normal while they're at a show. And then as a body, yeah, go ahead.
I want to mention, tell me if I'm wrong or if you know, I believe, if I remember correctly, Jim Masterson was specifically a groom while
Before.
doing this, right? So he is working with the same horses, and knowing what we know about him, I am certain he was tuned into those individuals, and because he's working on the same ones, knows what they need specifically for their goal, which is not the same as the booth set up at the horse show and you like roll your little pony up for a little something something before your class. Just saying.
Yeah, and
It's a
that's
big
become,
difference because of all the things you're talking about. If someone isn't intimately familiar with the horse and what the horse is doing and where their shortcomings are, perhaps they're not going to even know what is too much. You know what I mean? Like you're saying, I wouldn't necessarily want to work on a horse at a show. And I can certainly see why, unless you're like very familiar and have a very specific goal.
Yeah, and in osteopathy school, like this is another part of it. We were taught fascial trains, and we were taught what was kind of normal compensation patterns and what were abnormal compensation patterns. So if I were to go work on at a show or right before they go show, I would, but I would only take out what we call decompensations. So only the compensation patterns that weren't going along with everything else in the body or what you would expect. And so it's kind of like what you're saying, there's a thoughtfulness about working on a horse right before they go show that is going to either help them do their best because you're taking out, because decomps hurt, or you might destabilize them, or you might introduce some relaxation, too much of it that isn't therapeutic, because like, and you've even said this before, horses at shows they're in a lot of like sympathetic, right? They're in a different environment. There's a lot of stress. They're usually in small stalls. They go out and they do their thing, and then they come back, and then they're in the stall for like 20 hours or whatever. So I think light body work just to relax them, but not too much, is a good thing. And I think hand walking, if people would just hand walk their horses more, get them out, get them moving. It's just like an athlete, or I keep saying it's just like a dancer. You want to be like kind of stretching and moving all the time to really get the most benefit from doing your performance and not getting hurt too. But like, yeah, from a bodywork standpoint, I think like, and what Lisa Haldane was doing with the cutting horses, she was doing like light Masterson and like a lot of like acupressure points and bladder meridian. And that was perfect for those horses, but she wasn't doing so much that it would destabilize them. And I think that sometimes can be the problem at shows when you have a lot of different body work modalities. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying being thoughtful. If you want to make changes to the horse, do it a month before they go show. Like go in and do a big session. Let's talk about what's going on. Let's make some changes. All right, for the next week, you are hand walking that horse 2-3 times a day for 15 minutes. And maybe you wait 4 days before you get on them and you do a bunch of groundwork. Like that's how you would get a horse ready for that if you were really kind of planning and going, we're going to make some big changes here to really make this horse better, but you don't want to do that right before a show.
Yeah, exactly. And that way with from the training standpoint, we have time to step in and help the horse make the accommodations around the work that was done and help them explore it and get back to that place of understanding of how their body works in this new reality of the help that they just got. You can't do that in an hour.
It's a team thing, right?
Yeah.
Like we talked about this, I can go and help a horse. I can do some adjustments and make that horse move better. But then, if the training piece of it isn't there, then maybe I even set that horse up for more disaster in a sense by releasing tension that they needed to cope with the situation or the training methods that were being forced upon them.
Yeah. I've had a similar thing pop up at shows where I've kind of coached someone, like whatever we would call that, like someone, their trainer wasn't available for a weekend and they asked if I could help like school their student and horses at the show. And so doing that, going into it, I know I can't bring all of my current philosophy into that. if it's not someone I've worked with, right? Not at a show.
You're not magic.
Yeah,
Magic.
like so I have to kind of meet in the middle. I have to know what I'm looking for and what I'm thinking, and I have to know where they're at and what their experience it is, and then try to find where all that coalesces and comes together. And because if I did try to throw everything I know or think about what we're doing at that person or that horse, it would I feel like have the same destabilization that you're talking about with the body work. It would be too much at once. It would break down like either the emotional tensions or like the sympathetic tensions that the horse and or rider have learned to cope with showing. It would break those down at a moment where they're having to perform, and then now they don't have anything that works. So being able, like in that situation, what I usually do is like what you described with like the light massage, the relax, like how can we get, if this thing is stressful to the horse, how do we get it feeling a little bit better, but not so far to the point where they're like, I don't know how my body works anymore.
Exactly.
Because I've let this tension go and now I don't have a hind end anymore. So I think from a training standpoint, we have to kind of look at it the same way. Like, there's this thing happening right now that we need to get through. Like, what's the most help I can provide it without destabilizing it?
Yeah.
It's an art form. Anyway.
It is an art form.
It is.
All right. Well, where should we go next?
So one of the other things I have been kind of thinking about was, especially with what we've been discussing so far, is like the role of people in all this. So like horse showing or competition, or really kind of anything that we would decide to do with horses kind of go against horseness. Like there's nothing in the natural state of a horse that says, yeah, put me on a trailer, take me to this small venue where I'm going to be in a stall for a week and kind of somewhat be around other horses, but have bars between them and like these arbitrary separations. No horse would just, if you could talk to a horse and say, what would you like to do? Would you like to stay in your pasture with your friends where you have access to grazing and social and you're safe here? Would you like to stay here, or would you like to get on this trailer with me and go to this horse show? They're all choosing the pasture, right? And so I think a big part of this conversation is like, how do we bring that all together? Like the horse's natural state and what their wants and desires are, and then our wants and desires of, I would like to go compete. I would like to go show off what I've been working on with my horse. I want to win. I want to achieve this thing or be high point in this or get qualified for this year-end thing or maybe go to the Olympics with something. And I think like that's a tough question because it is so different from what the horse's natural goal of life is. Like they're just wanting to be safe and have some food and some social, understand what's going on around them. And then we're showing up.
I've said this in a past episode. Chase Jarvis, who is...
Yeah.
Are you familiar? It's a human guy, optimization guy. But he essentially talks about how our bodies, they're not setting us up for like our best life. They're setting us up to survive. And, luckily us and our horses are generally all in a situation where we can actually focus on like being even better than what our body is just going to naturally do on its own, what our brain and nervous system is going to do on its own, which to me is what optimization is all about. If we're going to go back to the title. Yeah,
exactly.
Is like, if you say it the way you said it, the horse show itself is stupid. There's no reason to go. And it's very easy for someone who wants to look at that and go, there should be no horse shows. They're obviously about horses. They're terrible. But I know that it really can benefit the horse not to go to the horse show for those hours, no. But that thought process of improvement and optimization and bettering, just like we're always saying like, oh, this personal development thing, it's so awesome. It is so awesome. That's what it can be that for horses too. I don't think they need the personal side like we do. Like, we can help them with the physical side because their bodies are just like, be safe, be alive, be fed, good enough. And in our world, the world they now live in, it's almost too much of those things if you're not careful. And without our help, they kind of aren't their best. You know? They are all those things that their brain tells them they should be. They are safe and fed and all the things. You know, their brain would say life is perfect. But we all know that, like, better is beyond pushing a little bit and doing stuff. And so to me, that, you know, that's what the horse show is about. Is that good for the horse too? It can be, if we train in a way that, you know, that puts that. I think it definitely can be. Again, not the hours at the horse show necessarily, but it's that building up to it. And do you have to go? No, you don't have to go. The same thing could happen and not go, but
you could still pursue that betterment at home, for sure. But like, I think I love how that is stated, because like we've essentially taken away the things that led to horses progressing through, you know, time, like, or evolution. Like, we've taken those things away. There's no predation in a domesticated life. Like, but how can we, in the safety that we want to provide them, in that, like, can we provide them challenge in a way where they are stimulated and get to use the parts of their brain and their body that aren't necessarily to be used for survival anymore? Like, how can we provide them an activity to do that allows them to use those parts and advance those parts of themselves? Yeah, I love that.
It's a balance, right? Like, I think you can, you know, go to shows and have a really balanced and comfortable horse. Yeah, it's like, for me, I'm just thinking of the practical things, like giving your horse like a recover period afterwards. Like, afterwards would be a great time for like a deep, in-depth body work session. Like I said, hand walking them at the shows, giving them maybe more frequent meals, or you know, free feed, or, you know, even, I don't want people to go out and do this necessarily, but like French green clay is something that can kind of coat the tummy. Like, you can do that, you know, 2 or 3 days before the show, or, you know, while you're at the show. Things like that might support them to where, like, I love what you guys are saying. Like, just with anything, there is some discomfort in growing. Challenge is not necessarily a bad thing. But they kind of have to be in a place in their nervous system where they can handle that, and it does progress in a good way, as opposed to then it just becomes too much of a stressor, and they're out of that window of being able to regulate themselves in homeostasis.
Well, and when you're a participant, you can call it a challenge. When you're not a participant, it's called something else.
Yeah.
You can come up with a number of different words that we could use there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, I think when you said nervous system, I'm like, well, yeah, and yeah, how you got there and how your whole world is what's going to determine what your nervous system feels like in those situations, you know. And then, then is it a challenge, or is it? I'm trying to stop using the word slavery. It wasn't so bad.
Well, I think that was the conversation I had in a previous podcast, is that idea of like the prison guard versus like a student educator. Like, there's a lot of ways to frame this like that are positive versus like the horse being forced into something. And it's really interesting, that idea of like survival. I think there is like a fine line we walk in the work we're doing, of like, is what we're doing interesting enough to kind of trigger the try, like, in the desire to learn and effort toward finding a solution. But that can very easily tip into Now I'm afraid. Now I'm in my sympathetic. Now I can't learn because I just have to get out of this situation. And I think that is a line that horses, once they're getting to the show, are just tipping over constantly. There's so many horses that are in survival mode, and it's not a positive experience for them. It's just something they're trying to get through, or eventually getting into freeze because they can't leave. They're stuck in a stall, and they're there for multiple weeks. And I think like a big part of this becoming a healthier experience for horses, that have we done the work at home that we can manage that line for them, that we're able to kind of walk with them down that path of like, well, let's keep this interesting enough where we're growing together, but not feeling dangerous, not feeling like, okay, now this is too much for me to bear. And I think there's a lot of work that has to go in to that process at home before even thinking about going to the show, so that all the tools are there. The horse has that capability of walking that line with you, and you have the skill set you need to help the horse manage that too. And the nutrition, the body work that we're doing before, like all the things, like a whole holistic approach. Do we have this horse's body feel? Do we have its feet in the right place? So that what we're asking it to go do, it has access to those things.
Yeah.
The one kind of interesting note, I'd gone a few years ago to try a horse for a client at a hunter jumper barn. I'd ridden a couple of horses, like not at their farm, but like at a show. Like I tried a couple of their horses at a show, and I was like, man, there's a little edge to these horses. Like I couldn't quite place it. Like they were totally functional, they were really athletic, but it was like this underlying kind of like vibration of worry under all the horses. And I was like, what's going on here? And so I had a chance to kind of go to that farm and try the horses at the farm. And the first thing I noticed kind of walking to the barn was the hecticness of life around these horses. So like there's just, everyone's kind of marching around kind of mindlessly. Grooms are coming up to horses and grabbing ears and putting ear pods in to them. Like bridles are getting pulled up real quick. Girths are being cinched real fast. And I'm like, oh, the whole life of this horse is on edge. These horses, like everything, nothing's happening thoughtfully. Everything's happening really quick. And I was like, man, probably just slowing down, like slowing all this down, putting a little thought before taking an action around the horse would probably just take that edge away from these horses, like right away.
Awareness and being tuned
exactly
in,
yeah
and maybe you guys just hit the jackpot on figuring out, like, for anybody who's competing, who is an owner or a rider, like what can you do? There's so many things that are out of your control, but like you guys just kind of pinpointed, what can you do? Slow down, be thoughtful,
exactly
with your horse, have a connection with your horse.
Yeah, think about like ask the horse, kind of present the thing you're going to do and allow them to like meld into it or accept it versus just forcing it on them. Like and it's something that like in the initial time it takes like a little extra time, but it saves you so much time in the future. It's such a net positive thing to do. And like you said, it's just such a simple thing that I think people could do immediately. Like that's something that someone listening to this can go do for their horse right now. And a little bit of thoughtfulness, slow it down, think about what you're doing and what you're presenting to the horse. Just that one thing can kind of create such a big change.
And watch the horse,
and
take their reaction in. And
exactly.
Without being mad about it.
Yeah.
Because as soon as you gotta sort yourself out a little bit and go back neutral yourself.
Yeah.
In a way, it's like, it's something, oh yeah, anybody can do this. Yes, they can.
Mm-hmm.
And some people will find out what a can of worms as soon as they try.
Yeah. It's like everybody just go to a Masterson seminar. Because what you guys are talking about is like you're training in that Masterson philosophy.
Exactly. Yeah.
And man, I mean, if I ever decide I want to go jump over something, I got Tamara's number.
That's right. Yeah, you do.
I would love to, I want to find a trainer like you guys because you're working with the horse.
I think, well, and that's bringing up Masterson is a great way. That's a great idea for somebody who's like, what do you mean watch my horse? Or like, my groom gets my horse ready, or whatever. In a way, I mean, that Masterson stuff is so beneficial for so many things, but man, that beginning stuff is all about like, this is how you watch your horse, and this is how you accept what your horse is giving you, and this is how you get to the other side of it. So yeah, that's a good idea.
And horses react so consistently to Masterson work that the feedback is there. Like, you can do a technique, and if you do it quietly and softly, the horse responds to it. And then you get to have that feedback mechanism work for you to be like, oh, wow, look what happened. Look, I took my time with this. I was thoughtful about my application of it. And look how the horse responded.
It's a conversation, and that's what I love. I mean, Dev, you're in this network of people knowing Tamara that I just love. I just love the way you train, even though I just met you. But this is like I think what could revolutionize the show world if just more trainers could train in this way, and more owners could be aware of just that subtle conversations with their horse.
Yeah.
What's interesting too is, I think we all would say Masterson is like, the Masterson method is popular in show worlds. I think it's getting more popular, but I don't think it's very common to say, okay, now take that Masterson and go groom your horse. You know what I mean? I think that's essentially what we're saying. We're like, me and Deb, I think that's like our normal way of being around a horse.
Operate.
Not necessarily doing a technique, but we're always seeing what they say and what happened when I did this or that. We're always there. But for people that aren't already used to being in that way, it's like, okay, take Masterson. Oh, you've took Masterson? Okay, now take all that and groom your horse. And tie your horse up.
Let's apply this to every interaction you have. And
go to the mounting block, and now, the whole deal. So,
but I do think like it can be hard to take those initial steps, but I do think because like once you start to listen to the horse and you start to observe, you see the effect it has. You see the change in real time. And that starts to snowball, I think, for us mentally, like where it's like, oh, wow, that was really cool to see that. What if I do it here? Wow, look at that. Look how now the horse's baseline is coming down. Like they're starting to get out of that sympathetic range more consistently. They're not getting so high up into it. So I do think like once you start taking the steps to get going with it, it does start to snowball and get easier and easier because it feels so good. Like it just feels right to do. And you notice your horse is feeling good, and what you thought you should be doing, all the old motor memory stuff can start to go away because now it's being replaced by something that's working better and feels better. I think like with the Tamara, I know we've had the benefit of getting to watch people like Vanessa work, right? And I don't think a lot of owners get that opportunity, right? Like the Bodywork gets scheduled while they're at work, or on a Monday when they're not at the barn. Like we've had the benefit of getting to watch people do cool stuff and in cool ways, and then be able to be there and ask questions about it and learn about it, and then get to use it ourselves or go explore it more. And I think a lot of people don't get that opportunity. I think like if I had anything to kind of encourage someone that's like a horse owner that maybe isn't that invested, like be there when your body worker's there. Like be there when the farrier is there.
I forget how much, whether it's Masterson or anything else, how much those services are just like, it gets done. Which I get.
I mean, I'm guilty of that too sometimes,
Well, time's time, right? Like we have a limited amount of it. But I do think like being present for all that and getting to see how people work. And then you might see some things you don't like. And then but you can advocate for your horse in those moments too. Like just being present is such a big part of this for our learning and our advocacy for the horse.
And I think too, sometimes people want to see a big show, or they want to see maybe not even a big show when it comes to the techniques, but they want to there's a lot of smoke and mirrors in the bodywork world.
Mm-hmm.
There's people that say, "Oh yeah, I just untwisted your ovary," and I'm being a little dramatic.
Yeah,
here.
yeah.
I just untwisted your mare's ovary by touching her back. No, you gotta get to the ovary.
Yeah.
Like you go in rectal, you gotta get
Yeah,
to the
yeah.
ovary to do that. And so, sometimes it's hard too for owners to know, like, okay, well, they said this was something that was wrong and then they fixed it, but there's no way to really like evaluate that or qualify that. And so, I guess this is just my own personal frustration is, like I said, people either want a big show and a big fix, like they think, oh, the chiropractor came and I got like 5 pops and my horse is good. Well, that could have been fascia popping. That could have been something else popping that wasn't the structure they wanted to pop. That could be not therapeutic for that horse. And then you see someone doing Masterson and it's so light and it's so whatever. And then people think, oh, they're not getting anything done. And so, like you said, I think it's good to be there and ask questions and really try to educate yourself, because there's so much smoke and mirrors out there. And the real testament to if that horse is, if the body work, the modality that you chose or the practitioner you chose worked, is again, tuning into your horse after the fact. Say, getting feedback from the trainer on how they're moving. Like, I don't want to see pictures before and after. I want to see how that horse is moving. I want feedback from the trainer, because they should be trained in mobility. You guys are, right? But I don't know about everyone else, but I know you guys are. But so I want that feedback from my horse and from my trainer, if I have a trainer like you guys, to know if that body work session, that type of work, was therapeutic for that horse or not. But anyway, sometimes people want that quick fix. And so it's like, that's, like you're saying, if the feet aren't right, the teeth, saddle fit, tack, blah, 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 if any of those factors are off, like, then we're in trouble. So it has to be that team effort. It's not just, I went in and adjusted the horse and everything's better. No, that's not how it goes.
I mean, unfortunately, I think sometimes the loud thing being done is the only thing being heard. Right. because we are being loud ourselves, or we're being too busy, and like that, the big showy thing. And I think this happens in training too. There's a lot of smoke and mirrors in training. There's a lot of like big loud woo moments in training. And like, but it's the small things, the things that you'd miss if you're not being quiet in a moment. Like, those are the most impactful things. And I think like, but it goes back to that issue. Like, it's just, we get so, I think, used to being busy and loud. Like, the world around us is really loud and busy. So we have to be louder and busier to kind of stand out in it or make our way through it. And horses are like, yeah, kind of just want things to be quiet. And making that adjustment of being quieter allows us to see that small thing that's really impactful and really important that just happened in the horse. Either whether it's like a change in their body or a release of muscle or like a clarity of movement, like that, yeah, we did this work and now we get on and now this is moving a little more freely. I have this range of motion coming through. The horse is more open to moving into this bend or into this direction because this thing happened. But a lot of times we ride loud. Yeah, and we're riding loud and we're not feeling those moments because we're too busy. We're doing too much and we're not stopping to kind of see what the horse's response is to the thing we're doing.
Like breathing, right? Like that.
Yeah.
Just, you can see what's going on in the horse and in how they're breathing, if it's fast or slow, or they're only breathing with a certain part of their belly. And it's kind of like us too. It's just that slowing down and getting into your body. This is all like very good for everyone right now that feels the world is too loud.
Yes, exactly. Never hurts to slow it down a little bit. We're not going to miss anything.
I think that's one of the things that is interesting when people do start to slow it down. People that are kind of used to, well, it's people that are riding the horse that was tacked up like you described.
Yeah.
All the stuff being done to it, and then it gets handed over to the person, and then they ride that horse. And when that person, let's say they enter the rabbit hole of one of our barns or something, and they start to slow it down and you start to get back to like a neutral, not like this like thing that kind of goes on, this buzzing, something always going. And then I feel like often that's where either the person or the horse or both will start to like, you start to get like the real honest horse, or sometimes it's like the real honest discomfort or whatever, you know what I mean? Like that's where it's where you have to go to like make these changes, have these conversations. But then like sometimes when you're used to living in that like other way, it's like, wow, you get there, it's a different place to be for sure.
Yeah, and we have to accept what's there. And the ramifications of that, and what that might mean for the like investment of resources and time that we have to put in, like the changes that we might have to make around the care and the teaching of this horse, like the changes we might have to make in ourselves, like it, like that's a big deal, and it's a big ask for people.
And I think, you know, it's fair that not everyone wants to spend the time and the money to rehab, if we want to call it that. You maybe talk about that. Would you use the word rehab, Deb?
I would. Rehab, restart. Yeah, I mean, because there's like, I mean, like if you're looking at the word rehab medically, there we have like let's say a physical, I have a knee that's bad that I need to rehab my knee, right? Well, there was a problem. I did something in my earlier part of my life that did this thing to my body, and now I'm having to take steps to help it feel better and find a more positive way of interacting with it so that I'm not continuing to hurt it. So if that's what rehab is for that, it's kind of what we're doing for horses too. Yeah, I don't think it necessarily has to have a negative connotation to it. I know for some people it will, but for me it's like, yeah, no, this is just what's happening. This got off on the wrong foot. We've caused a little bit of damage, maybe a lot of damage. And now we need to go back and find the source of that and build up healthier practices around this, and then allow the horse space to heal. And that will take however much time it will take, and it'll take whatever effort we have to do it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I have no problem with that word.
It comes to then at that point people deciding, do I want to spend this much time, money, whatever it may be, on this horse, and I'm not showing, you know? Yeah. And I'm not getting to do this thing. And then maybe we have to bring in Vanessa, and maybe we won't. Maybe this horse is never showing again, you know?
Yeah. The thing about the horse is he won't care.
Yeah, that's the best.
If anything, he might be happy about that outcome, right? You know, for us, I think there's a way to mitigate that. Like reality around that is like, okay, I don't get to do those things, but I get to do this thing, right? Like, so I think we could look at it as a negative, like, well, I don't get to show for a year while we're figuring this out, or, you know, I really had a big dream around this horse. This was going to be my like gold medal horse. This was the one that I was going to qualify for nationals on. And now I either won't or I don't know when. And like, I think that can be really disappointing, yes. But I think like there's another perspective there of like, but now I get to go on this journey. Now I get to explore these things. Now I get to become better at my horsemanship, so I don't find myself here again, and I don't find my horses in this place again. And so I think like there can be that phase of kind of feeling down around it, but I think like us as instructors, we can also kind of push the narrative in that direction. Yeah, we're, you know, because someone that we're having this conversation with found us, right? And we're not just going.
Narrative option is sell the horse and buy another one. That's really the only other option that's being in, you know, other circles. It's like there's actually a lot of fun, great stuff to do.
Exactly.
Whether you're on the horse or not on the horse, there's so much fun stuff. I know that's easy for us to say on this side of it. So I know it doesn't necessarily feel that way, and it feels confusing. I remember how confusing life felt on the ground sometimes before I got into groundwork. You know, it was like, oh, just let me get on this thing so I can fix it. This is terrible. someone hold it at the mounting block so I can get on and fix it.
Like if that foundation isn't there, then you're gonna have an injury. You're gonna have a horse that is unshowable.
Yeah. And the next horse might follow that same path. So but like I said, I'm not like going around shows having like knocking on doors, having this conversation. Like we would have this conversation with someone that came to us, right?
Dev sits at the end gate.
Yeah, I've got my white shirt and my black tie, and like I want to talk to you about your horsemanship. But yeah, no, it's someone that's come to us, so it's someone that's going to be open to that, right? And so they may have disappointment, they may even have grief around not having the future that they were seeing with their horse, but we can help them see another path. Like we can help them see another future for themselves and another skill set that they can learn. And I think that's really exciting and cool, a cool thing that we get to do. And hopefully it would set them up so that down the road, if maybe that horse does come around, maybe that horse starts feeling better. Or if not, then they end up with another horse in the future, but that they're going to be better prepared to help get to what they're looking for and achieve the ambitions that they're looking for.
Okay.
Yeah, you guys should do another one. And maybe, just talk more about
Yeah, I'm loving this. This is fun.
Have a lot to talk about.
Okay, well, we'll have to do it again soon then.
Yeah, we will.
Part of this again.
All right. Well, I will talk with you all soon.
Thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure.
Adios.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.